In those days, when the people of Israel had no king, and everyone did what seemed right in their own eyes, the land was filled with confusion. The voice of justice was faint, and the hearts of many had grown hard. Love for God had grown cold, and the cities, one after another, reflected the chaos of a people who had forgotten the holy covenant. In the hill country of Ephraim lived a Levite, a son of Levi, one chosen to serve in the things of the Lord. His life was meant to reflect divine order. Yet even among the consecrated, the darkness of the times had crept in. This Levite took for himself a concubine from Bethlehem in Judah. She was young, beautiful, and full of life, but her heart turned away from him. The scriptures say she was unfaithful to him, and afterward, leaving him, she returned to her father's house in Bethlehem. For months passed, 4 months of distance, silence, and reflection, and the Levite, feeling the emptiness, decided to go after her, not out of pride, but out of desire for reconciliation. He prepared his donkey, took with him a servant, and set out on the road southward toward Bethlehem in Judah. When he arrived, he was received kindly by the young woman's father. The old man, seeing him, rejoiced greatly and urged him to stay. For 3 days they ate, drank, and shared fellowship together. It was a meeting of peace and hope. But time went on, and each time the Levite prepared to depart, the father of the young woman begged him to remain a little longer, offering him bread, wine, and rest. Thus 5 days passed. On the 6th day, as the sun began to set, the Levite finally decided to leave. Despite the old man's pleas, he would stay no longer. He took his concubine and his servant, and they departed. Evening fell, and the shadows stretched long over the dusty roads of Israel. The servant, seeing the night approach, said, "My master, let us stop and spend the night in the city of the Jebusites." But the Levite replied, "We will not enter a city of foreigners, where there are no Israelites. We shall continue on to Gibeah." So they pressed forward, crossing hills and valleys under the dying light of day. When night fell, they arrived at Gibeah, a city belonging to the tribe of Benjamin. They entered to spend the night there, but no one took them into their home. The silence of the streets reflected the indifference of a people who had forgotten hospitality, a virtue once sacred among the children of Abraham. The travelers sat in the city square, waiting for someone to invite them in. Time passed until an old man, returning from work in the fields, saw them. He too was from the hill country of Ephraim, though he lived there among the Benjamites. When he saw them, he approached and asked, "Where have you come from, and where are you going?" The Levite explained his journey, his origin, and his purpose. Then the old man kindly said, "Peace be with you. Do not spend the night in the square. Come to my house, and whatever you need, I will provide." The Levite accepted, and they entered the house. They washed their feet, fed the donkeys, and sat down to eat and drink. For a moment there was peace, but outside darkness was waiting. Night fell upon Gibeah like a heavy cloak. The air was thick, and in the empty streets there lingered an uneasy silence. Inside the old man's house, the Levite and his concubine sat at the table, eating and drinking in peace, grateful for the hospitality they had at last found. The old man, eager to please them, served with care. But beyond those walls, something dark began to stir in the shadows. As the joy of the meal rose, a murmur of voices sounded outside. Then came the pounding on the door. Men of the city surrounded the house. They were sons of Belial, men without mercy or fear of God, whose souls were poisoned by evil. They struck the door violently, shouting to the old man, "Bring out the man who came into your house, that we may know him." Their words dripped with perversion. They sought to shame the guest, to defile the sacred gift of hospitality, and to turn the night into an offense against God himself. The old man went out to speak to them. His voice trembled, not from fear, but from horror at the vileness of their intent. "No, my brothers," he said, "I beg you, do not commit such wickedness. This man has come into my house. Do not do this disgraceful thing." But they would not listen. Corruption had sealed their ears. Then, in his desperation, the old man offered what seemed unthinkable. "Behold, my virgin daughter and his concubine. I will bring them out to you. Do with them as you please, but do not commit this outrage against this man." The silence that followed was darker than the night itself. Then the men shouted again, pounding harder upon the door. And the Levite, fearing for his life and for that of his host, took his concubine and brought her out to them. She fell into the hands of those men. The scripture says they abused her all through the night, until the dawn. And when the first rays of the sun touched the walls of Gibeah, they let her go. She staggered back toward the house where her master was staying, walking slowly, wounded, weak, her life slipping away with every step. She reached the door, and there she fell. Her hands rested upon the threshold, as if still trying to enter, but there was no strength left, no voice, no life. When morning came, the Levite opened the door to continue his journey, and there he saw her, his concubine, lying at the entrance, motionless, cold, silent. He looked upon her with sorrow, with disbelief, with the weight of horror upon his soul, and he said, "Rise and let us go." But there was no answer. Silence was her only reply. Then the Levite placed her upon his donkey and set out for home. No words can describe the emptiness of that road. The path of return was not the same as the one he had taken before. The man who had set out seeking reconciliation now returned carrying the lifeless body of the woman he loved. The sun rose slowly over the hills of Ephraim as the Levite returned to his home. The silence of dawn contrasted with the invisible cry that filled his soul. The journey had been long, but the weight of memory was longer still. This man, who had set out in search of reconciliation and peace, returned now carrying a burden of death and shame. When he arrived, he dismounted from his donkey. He looked upon his concubine, lifeless, and understood that something had to be done. Israel could not remain asleep. Sin could not remain hidden. The evil that had taken place in Gibeah was an abomination, an affront to holiness, an open wound in the midst of God's people. With a heart hardened by grief and indignation, the Levite made a dreadful yet purposeful decision. He cut the body of his concubine into pieces, limb by limb, and sent them throughout the territory of Israel, to the 12 tribes, with a message that, in essence, said, "Behold what has been done in Israel. Consider it, take counsel, and speak." As the messengers went through the land, bearing that terrible sign, the impact was profound. From Dan to Beersheba, and even to the land of Gilead, all who saw it were horrified. Nothing like it had ever been seen or heard since the days when Israel came up out of Egypt. The rumor spread like fire across dry fields. Leaders, elders, and men of war began to gather. It was the cry of a wounded nation. It was the call for justice. And so the tribes of Israel rose up and assembled at Mizpah, united as one man. From the farthest regions came the representatives of the people, 400,000 men of war, ready to listen, to judge, and to act. The Levite stood before the assembly. His face bore the marks of fatigue, of mourning, and of burning indignation. With a trembling voice, he recounted what had happened. "I came with my concubine to Gibeah, a city of Benjamin, to spend the night there. But the men of the city rose against me and surrounded the house where I was staying. They intended to kill me, and they abused my concubine, so that she died. Behold, I took her body and sent it throughout all the territory of Israel, because they had committed a vile and disgraceful act in the midst of the people of God. Now, you children of Israel, take counsel among yourselves and determine what must be done today." All the people listened, and the silence that followed spoke louder than any word. The Levite's grief had become the grief of a nation, and the indignation that rose in every heart burned like a fire kindled by divine justice. Then all the people responded as one. "None of us will go to his house, nor will anyone return to his tent, until we have done justice to Gibeah." Thus Israel resolved to rise up. The tribe of Benjamin would be called to account. Sin could not go unpunished. The corruption born in one city could not be allowed to spread across the land. And though the Levite's heart was shattered, he knew that his act, though cruel, had awakened the nation. He had made the 12 tribes remember who they were and to whom they belonged. Pain was transformed into purpose. Tragedy became a calling, and the death of an innocent woman became the beginning of a holy war for the purity of Israel. All Israel was gathered at Mizpah. 400,000 voices rose as one, crying out for justice. The mountains echoed with the sound of armies, and the heavens themselves seemed to bear witness to a decisive moment. It was the awakening of a wounded nation, one that had at last chosen to stand. The elders of Israel sent messengers throughout the tribe of Benjamin. They spoke with firmness and sorrow, saying, "What is this wickedness that has been done among you? Deliver now the worthless men of Gibeah, that we may purge the evil from Israel and remove this disgrace from the people of the Lord." But the response of Benjamin was arrogance. They refused to listen. They would not hand over the guilty. Instead of seeking justice, they rose to defend sin. They gathered 26,000 armed men, and among them 700 chosen warriors who could sling a stone at a hair's breadth and not miss. The heart of Benjamin grew hard, and their pride became their downfall. Then Israel, before lifting the sword, went up to the house of God at Bethel and inquired of the Lord, saying, "Who shall go up first to battle against the children of Benjamin?" And the Lord replied, "Judah shall go up first." With faith, Israel advanced. Justice seemed certain and victory appeared near. But on that first day, the men of Benjamin came out from Gibeah and struck down 20,000 Israelites. The shock was great. The people, confused and broken, wept before the Lord until evening and asked again, "Shall we go up again to battle against our brothers, the children of Benjamin?" And the Lord said, "Go up against them." The next day, Benjamin came out once more and struck down another 18,000 men of Israel. The sorrow was immense. The children of Israel fell on their faces, fasting, weeping, and offering burnt sacrifices before the Lord. They could not understand why, though they fought for justice. They were tasting defeat. In the midst of their tears, the priest Phinehas inquired again of the Lord, saying, "Shall I yet again go out to battle against my brothers, the children of Benjamin, or shall I cease?" And the Lord replied, "Go up, for tomorrow I will deliver them into your hands." And so, on the third day, Israel set an ambush around Gibeah. The men took their positions in silence, waiting for the appointed moment. Benjamin, confident in their previous victories, came out once more to the field and began to strike down Israel as before. But this time it was a trap. The Israelites pretended to flee, and Benjamin pursued them eagerly. Then those lying in ambush rose up from behind, entered the city, and set it ablaze. When the men of Benjamin looked back and saw the smoke of their city rising to the heavens, they knew that the judgment of the Lord had come upon them. Israel turned back, and the battle changed course. The pride of Benjamin fell, and their men began to flee. That day, 25,000 of Benjamin's warriors were slain. Only 600 escaped, taking refuge in the rock of Rimmon. The war was over, but victory came with tears. Israel had purged the evil, but they had also lost their brothers. The sin of a few had brought the destruction of almost an entire tribe. Now, let us reflect on this story. Chapter 19 of the book of Judges is not merely a tale of the past. It is a mirror of the human heart when it turns away from God, when love grows cold, when compassion disappears. When everyone does what seems right in their own eyes, the soul loses its way, and suffering becomes a part of life. But even in the midst of darkness, God continues to speak, calling us to return, to remember that without Him there is no order, no peace, no light. The great lesson is this: when God does not reign, chaos reigns. But when He governs, life is filled with peace. So turn your gaze to the Lord. Let His presence dwell in your home, in your mind, and in your heart. For where God is, there is hope. Where He dwells, harmony is restored. And where His love rules, the soul finally finds rest. If this reflection has touched your heart, I invite you to subscribe to the channel, leave a comment, and tell me what lesson the story has taught you. Your participation helps this message of faith reach more hearts. And if you know someone who needs to hear words of hope, share this video. Together, we can continue bringing the light of God's Word to every corner of the world. May the Lord bless you